So, Canadian Solar's earnings are due next week. What can we expect? So far, we've seen 5 analysts upgrading their earnings estimates while 0 have downgraded them, which usually means that we're heading in for an earnings beat. The current estimate consensus is 41 cents, and up until a month and a half ago, it was negative 46 cents, so you can see that there has been a big jump in expectations. I am optimistic myself. I think that the inflation and higher silicon prices were included in the analyst estimates because of the previous quarter, so hopefully there won't be any nasty surprises. Unfortunately, the Shanghai shipping index has continued to rise, meaning that freight expenses have gone up. However, the price of silicon and silver has remained relatively consistent over the last 3 months. There has also been an increased push towards deploying solar, especially in China, where solar installations in 2021 are expected to exceed 60 gigawatts. So, solar panel manufacturers have started to raise their prices. That applies to Chinese companies more, perhaps, but Canadian Solar has a lot of projects in China, so it's likely that they've had a nice sales bump too. Basically, there's a good chance to get either a positive or a negative surprise, and we'll see that next week, although personally I'm leaning towards a positive turnout. Last week, another solar company named Sunworks reported their earnings and they were bad. The company had a net loss of 4.8 million on a net revenue of 6.2 million. Now, Sunworks is a solar installer, not manufacturer, but they are a solar company. I'm not sure whether investors are not aware of the differences or whether they just look at the sector as a whole, but the price of solar companies tends to move in tandem, so because Sunworks reported bad earnings, other solar companies took a price hit as well. Personally, I'm not a fan of Sunworks, and it's easy to see why. Not only has the company failed to grow in 4 years, it is actually performing worse. It is definitely not a stock to hold for the long term, unless you're seeing something that I'm not. But given their earnings reports, I'm quite happy to avoid them. The only real reason to buy Sunworks, in my opinion, is to speculate on solar prices. Typically, it moves about twice as much as the other solar companies, so you would get a much better return on a short-term trade, but you could also lose a lot more if you're wrong, so bear that in mind. Now, the price of solar companies has been going down recently, and in addition to Sunworks' bad earnings, I suspect that the recent increase in US inflation is behind that. In case you missed it, US inflation compared to last year is 4.2%, and we can also see the spike reflected in commodity prices, like silicon or silver. Solar manufacturers like Canadian Solar tend to have lower net margins, and an increase of inflation can easily reduce them, although Canadian Solar is vertically integrated and does tend to have a higher margin than its competitors, so it does have a slight advantage. However, this price movement can also be good for the company. Why? Well, the price of Canadian Solar has already gone down because of expected lower earnings, meaning there is less room for it to go further down as the stock has simply become cheap enough at $36.6 per share. However, if it turns out that investors were wrong, it's quite likely that the price will jump up a decent amount. Basically, the upside is bigger than the downside, the potential profit is bigger than the potential loss, and I wouldn't be surprised if we hit $42 per share on good news, which is about a 15% gain. The company right now is oversold, it's below its 50-day moving average, below its 200-day moving average, and it has just bounced off of its support around $34-$35. Of course, if you're in it for the long term, daily or weekly movements in the price probably won't concern you. However, the price right now offers a good entry point for anyone who wants to buy this amazing solar panel producer. Finally, as I mentioned before, all solar stocks, all renewable stocks really, across Asia, America and Europe tend to move in tandem, so the results of these earnings could also influence the price of companies like First Solar, Enphase, SunPower, Sunrun, etc. All of these stocks have been hit pretty bad in the last few weeks, so they could see a nice jump in price if we get good news. And if we get bad news, well, you'll be able to get some of the best solar stocks on the market on a discount. Remember, solar is a long-term play and it's only just starting to take off. It's an almost certain bet as long as you've got the patience and the time to wait it out. That's my 2 cents on Canadian Solar for now. Check out my detailed analysis of the company and 2 other top solar picks. If you've enjoyed this video, let YouTube know by liking, commenting, sharing this video with some friends and subscribing. Thanks for watching and I'll talk to you soon.